All right. I think we're live. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're just going to give people a minute to join the live stream, and then we'll get started. So, in the meantime, if there's anyone out there that is listening, if you could just check our audio. Kevin, do you want to say something as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe do you want to do intros as a way
Well,
to?
we'll wait another minute before people join, and we'll just do the intros. But yeah, if there's anyone watching that wants to just leave a comment and let us know about the audio, should be okay. Oh, sorry, I had that open. Not sure if you heard that. I had the live stream open in another window.
I did hear that.
Okay. So, all right, well, why don't we just get going, and we'll do some introductions. So thank you for joining. If you watch my channel, you already know me, but I'll just go through a little bit. I've been a Tesla owner since 2017, started my channel in 2018. And as you know, I'm a huge Tesla fan, I like to talk about not only all of the great things that Tesla's doing, but if they're not doing something so well, I will talk about that too. I believe in having a very balanced approach when it comes to talking about Tesla and whether you should buy one and that type of stuff. So before I introduce my guest here, I just got a small little quick story. When I was thinking about doing this podcast, if you will, for lack of a better word, I was thinking, what better guest for this topic than the actual person who introduced me to Tesla back in, I think that would have been August of 2017. And I had already put a deposit down on an Audi Q5, and TeslaKevv here saved me. So why don't I just turn over you, TeslaKevv, to kind of introduce yourself.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't actually going to mention that you were a former Audi driver, but since you volunteered it, I think it's open season now for you. But apologies to any current Audi drivers out there. But yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Between the two of us, I think we were talking about it. We both got our Model X's within a few weeks of each other back in 2017, and our Model 3s within a few weeks of each other in 2018. And I think between the four cars, well, now that you have the fifth car, you have the Model Y. I think we were doing a quick calculation. We have over 200,000 miles of accumulated driving wisdom, I guess, with Tesla. So I think I think it's going to be a pretty good show today.
All right. Thanks for that. So, and Kevin, you have as you mentioned, a Model X and a Model 3. Are you thinking about a Model Y?
Well, it depends on the timing of the Cybertruck. So like many families out there, I have a child getting ready to go to university. He currently drives the Model 3 all over the place and has resigned himself to never, ever drive a gas car. And so he wants to buy the Model 3 off us when he goes to university in September. And so depending on whether or not the Cybertruck is ready, we may have to get a bridge vehicle. So, and that would definitely be the Model Y. And then I have some hard decisions to make once the Cybertruck becomes available as to which one I keep, the Model Y or my Model X, which is near and dear to my heart, as you know. So.
All right, great. I'm just checking because normally there'd be comments and questions by now. So I wonder if maybe I didn't turn on chat. So just 1 second, let me just double check that. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The chat is open. Okay, great. Okay. So we have a number of different topics to kind of frame the discussion, but the objective of today's discussion, hi, Sashman, how are you? The objective of today's conversation is really aimed at people who are thinking, hey, Dax, are thinking about buying a Tesla. There might be a first-time Tesla purchaser and have a ton of questions about what's it like, and what goes into that buying decision, and what's holding you back. Is there any information that we have that we can tell you about that might help you with that buying decision? So this entire broadcast today is just all about helping you and answering any questions that you may have about your personal Tesla journey. Or if you're not getting a Tesla and you just have, some comments as to why you're not getting one, we're happy to kind of talk about those as well, because I know that, there are still some concerns out there, and there's a number of different options. The auto industry is a huge industry. And I think there's 31 million cars per year sold or something like that, some crazy numbers. So that's the objective for today. So let's kind of go into launch right into the discussion. So the first up that Kev and I were just talking before the podcast, and we were thinking, okay, what is the number one question that people have for us, just generally about buying a Tesla? And usually that's about the total cost of ownership, and more particularly, it usually starts off that the Tesla is way more expensive. How could I justify spending that versus getting a Honda Accord or a BMW 330i or some other type of gasoline vehicle. So, and this is Kevin's back in like August of 2017 when I had that deposit on an Audi Q5. And you said to me, I remember, it was like, have you done the math? Right? Like, because I was thinking, I can't afford a Tesla, right? And so basically, Kevin kind of helped me to kind of look at that math and see what it really looked like over 5 years, because it's not just about your acquisition costs, it's about the cost of all the other things, like your maintenance, your fuel, all these type of things. And in the end, in many cases, I mean, there's some edge cases out there where maybe it's not true, but most of the TCO calculations that I've ever seen comparing like for like priced vehicles in the luxury segment, Tesla's going to come out ahead in the TCO. Kevin, anything you want to kind of chime in and add to that while I kind of tee up a cool little TCO calculator?
Sure. Thanks. One of the questions I get all the time, and I think maybe it's it's just the way people think when they buy a car, is they look at the sticker price and they say, that's the price, and so why would I spend this much more for a Tesla versus a car that's pretty good, right? And I think looking at the total cost of ownership is really the only true way to compare apples to apples, because most people forget. I don't know how they forget, but most people forget when they go to the gas station that they've got to spend $50 to $100 to fill their tank every so often. So, and honestly, when we had one Tesla and one gas car, it became really, really unpleasant to go to the gas station. That's one of the big sea changes that you'll experience once you own a Tesla, is your house becomes your gas station. And so no more going to the gas station and seeing those people line up at Costco for 9 cents a liter discount, waiting 45 minutes in line for Costco gas becomes absurd in your mind, right? And so really, total cost of ownership is really the only way to look at it. And obviously with a Tesla, you're not paying for gasoline. Most people who have not done a lot of research really don't know that EVs in general are much, much more simple vehicles than internal combustion engine cars, and last much longer, require way, way less maintenance. And when we get into talking about the regen stuff around braking for electric vehicles, and you realize that you may never change the brakes on your car, or at the very least, change them half as often or less than a regular car, it becomes amazing.
So let me just pause you for a moment there, because we want to take questions as we go along, and I've had this one up on the screen here. So how much would it normally cost you to install a wall connector charger? So I had mine installed. It was about, I think, 1,200 Canadian dollars to have that installed, and the unit itself was $500. So it was pretty expensive. I mean, you can shop around out there. You get maybe a cheaper electrician, maybe some shady dude or dudette that might do it for less. But when it comes to electricity, I don't like to mess around. Now, I know, Kevin, you initially had NEMA 1450, and maybe you talk about the comparison in price.
Yeah, what I found, Paul, was that if you asked an electrician to install the wall charger, the high power wall charger, you're looking around $1,000, very similar to the price you just quoted. If you ask them to install a NEMA 1450, because what I originally used my mobile connector that came with the car, and so a cost-effective way of doing it, rather than pay for the high power wall charger and the $1,000, the NEMA 1450 was only $500. And it was a certified electrician, complete with ESA certificate and sign off from the authority. So it was really, really inexpensive. And then later on, I did my own, and I think there's a TeslaKevv, Tesla Canuck video showing the replacement of the NEMA
Yes.
1450 with the high-powered wall charger, and that cost nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's actually very, very simple to replace the NEMA 1450 with the wall charger, and there's tons of videos out there. Of course, ours is the best, but
Of course.
there are tons of videos out there for even the most weary of novice electricians. So,
okay. Before we get into like some of the TCO discussion here, I just wanted to pull up this kind of well, not really a question, but sort of reasons to validate. Daniel wants to validate his long-range rear-wheel drive pre-order. And so hopefully, Daniel, through this conversation, we're going to help you to sort that out. If you have any specific questions, please just put them in the comments and we'll get to them if we don't answer your questions through the conversation. All right, I just want to kind of quickly go through this TCO calculator. So this is from PG&E, which is California, their hydro company. I don't know how else you would describe that, but they actually have a
Pacific Gas and Electricity.
Pacific Gas and Electric. Thank you. PG&E. Yeah, they have this fantastic TCO calculator, and I'm going to put the links to all this stuff in the video when we're done and it gets posted to YouTube. But basically, you can pick just about any car and go over what the total cost of ownership is. Now, it's going to differ a little bit based on where you live, because I mean, California does have a lot more generous incentives than perhaps some other states or here in Canada. So just keep that in mind as you look through this type of a TCO calculator. But if we can kind of just scroll through it here, what I want to do is I got two examples here that we'll talk about. So one is it looks at a comparable priced gas fossil fuel powered BMW, so the 330i in this case, because that's a pretty common one that I get when people are thinking about, do I get the Model 3 or do I get the BMW 330i? So if you look at the total, let's just go down to the end, and this takes into account things like resale value as well. And I know a lot of people usually are quick to point out, oh, did you include resale value? But I actually think resale value benefits Tesla. That maybe we'll get into that discussion later. But here you can see that there's almost a $9,000 difference in favor of the Tesla from a TCO perspective. Kevin, are you surprised at all about that?
Actually, I'm surprised it's only that much, to be honest with you. And the reason I say that is because my family is very active in sports, and we drove all over Canada and the United States for tournaments, hockey tournaments, baseball tournaments, and the Tesla turned out to be honestly the ultimate family vehicle. Put almost 55,000 kilometers, I think it's 40,000 miles on in the first year, and what I was paying for my previous gas vehicle versus the Tesla, it was way more savings than
yes, because this assumes average, right?
Yes.
So you might do better if you don't drive a lot, but if you're like you, for example, who drives a lot, your savings are going to be even higher than this.
And I made a habit of keeping my cars for 7 to 8 years, 180 to 200,000 kilometers, and so these numbers are impressive. But when you start getting into above 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers, the numbers just skyrocket for a gasoline car and for maintenance, whereas the Tesla stays the same, right? There's really not much more maintenance that you need to do. So this is great, but for those people who drive a lot or keep their cars a lot longer, the value proposition is much higher.
Yeah, that's a really great point. If you do a lot of driving out there, it just really helps to solidify, your choice towards a Tesla, or probably any EV really. But we're going to talk a little bit later about why Tesla over another EV, because there are a lot of distinct advantages there. In the meantime, though, I did want to kind of talk about one other comparison, because a lot of times when people talk TCO, they're talking about Tesla versus an ICE competitor, right? So I wanted to take a look at, even though BMW doesn't have a pure battery electric vehicle, they do offer a plug-in hybrid, so the 330e, and it qualifies for a bunch of incentives, especially in California, probably elsewhere as well, right? So in the US, they'll still have the $7,500 credit probably. I don't know, does BMW still have that? I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up.
You know what? If they do, it's coming to an end soon, I think. So
yes, but if you look at this example, right, where the BMW 330i comes in very close in terms of TCO, the Tesla is $36 cheaper over 5 years, which isn't a lot. So why don't we talk a little bit about why, and we might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but why it's still more advantageous to look at Tesla over something like a BMW 330e. Kevin, do you want to kind of launch into that conversation?
So I have a huge bias against hybrids, and the reason for that is because one of the value propositions that electric has over gas is simplicity. Way less wear and tear, way less maintenance, much simpler drivetrains. And so the problem with hybrids is you're actually increasing the complexity of the drivetrain system in a hybrid over even a gas car, right? Because you've got all the complexity of a gas car system, and now you've got an electric system in there, and you've got to mate the two, right? Which jacks the complication factor, a fair bit, right? And so the amount of maintenance and the amount of complexity in a hybrid, you'll save money on gas and stuff, but I've always felt it's not a really good value proposition long term anyways. So
yeah.
I know the Prius has been a star for Toyota for a long time, but that's before that we had battery electric vehicles, right? So
yeah, I agree with you about the complexity, right? Because you're mixing two drivetrains, to this, to that, and the internal combustion engine itself has just so many more moving parts, right, than an electric motor. So the overall like it could be 5 years you're relatively close, but I wonder what that 6th year is going to look like. It could potentially go totally in the direction of Tesla if you keep your car longer, right? But I do want to, again, it's a Tesla channel, obviously. I've got a bias towards Tesla, but I like to kind of temper that a little bit by showing there are some other options out there, but here's why you might want to consider Tesla over these other options. So that's kind of why I wanted to present a balanced case here. Okay, let's take a look at, see if we have some questions here. So we have a question: should I get a Model Y now or wait until MCU3? I'm not in a rush. I haven't heard a lot about MCU3, Kevin. I don't know if in your research have you come across that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk of MCU3. There's no, as far as I know, no official release date. If it were me, I would probably take the saving money by getting a Tesla now over waiting for MCU3, simply because number one, we don't know when it's going to come. Number two, we don't know what features it's going to support, because presumably they will be launching MCU3 to support new features. And lastly, if it's really needed, like the difference between MCU1 and MCU2, they'll offer retrofits, right? And so the amount, I would suggest probably the amount of money you'll save would be far in excess of a cost of a retrofit, depending on when it comes, because I can't see it coming out in under, under 12 months would be shocking to me. More likely, I think we're talking 18 to 24 months probably for MCU3, unless it's needed for the Cybertruck or some other big rationale. So
yeah. I think Black House Brew here has a really good point here. If you wait for new tech, you'll never get the car. And with Tesla, I think that's more relevant than ever, right? Because, and this is part of the pro and part of the con of Tesla, right? Which is that there is no such thing as a model year. As we've known it in the past, and Tesla can update their cars at any time. And the most recent example is the pedestrian speaker, right? Because a lot of people who got the latest release didn't get the pedestrian speaker features like boombox. And this is kind of why Tesla is different, is that if you wait, you might get something for waiting, but you're going to miss something that's coming down the pipeline. But Tesla does have a really good track record, in my opinion, of doing things like retrofits, right? And it's just very different about waiting for a Tesla versus waiting for something else, right?
So fun. It's so funny that you mentioned the boombox, Paul, because when the speaker first came out, the boards were full of people saying, "How the hell do I unplug this thing? I don't want it making 111 noises when I put it in reverse. I bought an electric car because I want it to be silent." So the boards were just full of people wanting to unhook the speaker, and now after the boombox update, all you can find on the boards now is Tesla going to offer a retrofit? How do I get this speaker? Blah blah blah. Like it's funny because it's a full 180. Like it's complete opposite. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. No one does this like Tesla. Like they really they were forced to do the external speaker due to governmental regulations, and in true Tesla form, they found a way to make it cool and fun, just like the way they do with everything.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain that cool factor is one that's very different from any other automobile manufacturer. And a lot of people argue that Tesla isn't really an automobile manufacturer; they're a technology company, right? So I think that's why you see a lot of these differences versus what you might see with a BMW or some other brand where you buy the car today and that's the best it's ever going to be, right? Dax has a really great question. You and I were talking about this before the podcast, which is about the 4860 cells and waiting. And I know that you had a theory around how this was going to get rolled out. Kevin, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the 4680 cells, obviously they're a game changer. Huge amount of energy density, and they're actually I think what they're going to do is they're going to pair them with the structural battery pack, where the rigidity of the battery pack actually forms part of the body. I don't think we're going to see, because of the nature of spinning up the manufacturing in volume for those cells, it's going to take some time. I can't see the 4680 cells coming to anything but the Roadster and the Semi and the Plaid version of the Model S, things that really need high density energy. We might see them in the Cybertruck, but that'll depend on when they launch the Cybertruck.
So you're talking in the short term, though, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, longer term. Who knows?
Yeah, I wouldn't see that. I can't see them in the Model 3, the Model Y, or the regular X or S anytime soon. Those other vehicles are going to be in line for those cells first, I think. So the one thing I do see, maybe, Paul, is the 2170 cells from the Model 3 and the Model Y going into the X and the S for a refresh. I do see that. It'll probably bump range because of their energy. They're more energy dense than the 18650s. I would see that probably going another 10 to 15% range increase for the Model 3s and the Model Xs.
Okay, cool. All right, let's see here. Thank you very much, Mitchell. Appreciate it. Always like to get those kudos. Let's take a look and see where we are in our agenda. Sometimes I get totally, if you watch my live streams before, I get totally off the agenda because I like to have an interactive discussion versus being a talking head at somebody. So at any time, if you have any questions, just feel free to throw them in the comments. In the meantime, we will, use our agenda as a little bit of structure. So, okay, the next thing go ahead.
I was just going to say, I noticed in the comment there's a commentary going on with the used Model 3s and offering full self-driving, and I agree with the commentary. It's a big gimme, and I think it is a sales strategy for Tesla to compensate potential owners for not getting the newer stuff that's coming out down the road, like the speaker and various different things. So but I will say full self-driving is I would pay for it every single time, just based on what I know from those who have a Tesla who don't have full self-driving. I would if I were being given it, I would take it and run.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a question. Do you think the Berlin Gigafactory will have an impact on price? That's a great question. I mean, usually as volumes increase, price goes down. So, Gigafactory Berlin is going to certainly generate additional volume of Model Y and its components. But is there any other benefit? I'm not sure I see a labor benefit or anything like that in terms of contributing to price.
If you use the Gigafactory in China as sort of a proxy for this discussion, I think what Tesla saw the opportunity to do in China, and maybe they do it in Berlin as well, is they introduced, because of the supplier, they introduced the lithium iron phosphate battery in China for the Model 3, right? Which actually had a big impact in price. It wasn't so much the volume that drove the price down; it was the local labor reduction cost, as well as the new battery pack, which equated to a significant discount in the Model 3. I don't know if we'll see the same thing in Berlin, but I wouldn't be surprised if they rolled out the same type of battery system, like the lithium iron phosphate batteries for the Model 3 in Europe as well, in Giga Berlin. So.
And we know how efficient the Germans are. They're very efficient. So
if they can find efficiency, the Germans will find it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of glancing through for any questions here.
There's a comment about does the MCU2 lag? Well, I have the Model 3, which had the MCU2 from the beginning, and the Model X with the MCU1, and I did the retrofit. The only time I've ever noticed the MCU2 lag is at the very beginning when you engage the toy box, Netflix or something like that. I notice a little bit of a slowdown there, and that'll depend on your internet connection, but very, very little lag. I've not experienced much of anything on the MCU2. I don't know about you, Tesla Canuck, but I've been very happy with MCU2.
Yeah, I mean, I have not had any of the lag myself with MCU2, both on the Model X. I upgraded from MCU1 to MCU2, just like you did, the Model 3, the Model Y. But where there is some noticeable lag is in the loading of the apps, I find, right? So when you load up YouTube, whether you're on Wi-Fi or on LTE, that initial load up seems to take quite a bit of time. I don't know if you've noticed that, but once it's there, once the app is loaded, it's pretty fast from that point forward.
Yeah, but maps, day-to-day driving, the
it's
function
like butter.
of the car. It's super slick. Like, it's just, I've not noticed any issues whatsoever.
Yeah. Let's see here. This is a good question. What objectively is the best Tesla in your opinion, Kevin?
Geez, this one's okay.
So look, for different reasons.
Look, I love my Model X. I love it like nothing else. Honestly, I do. But the price takes it out of contention for the best title. I think for bang for the buck. I mean, I don't think anyone could question the Model 3 from bang for the buck perspective. The Model Y jumps in from a utility perspective. The Model Y jumps to the top of the list if you're factoring in not just bang for the buck, but also utility. The Model Y has almost as much trunk space as my Model X, and it's 40% cheaper. You know, it doesn't have the cool doors, which yeah, I totally love, and it doesn't have the traditional cluster, which some people, and that's a personal opinion, some people love the traditional cluster, some people like the new version, but I have both, so I it's not a decision for me. But yeah, I think the Model 3 is number one for bang for the buck, and Y is best overall if you're factoring in utility, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for me, just to chime in, since I've owned an X3 and Y, and I still have the X and the Y, I honestly believe that the Model Y is probably the best car ever that ever has come to market. Like, it's just, it for me, it just fits, like, and just satisfies every requirement I have out about a vehicle. Right? It's bigger than the Model 3. It's you know, it's fast. It's, you know, mine is well built. We'll talk a little bit of some of the news around the quality issues around build quality of the Model Y, but mine has been perfect. And I just think it's a fantastic car. I just love everything about it. But that being said, you know, the Model X was the first, and they say that you'll never forget your first Tesla. Just saying.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
All right. So I guess CJ, that wasn't very conclusive. But for me, I'm going to say Model Y. Sounds like, Kevin, you're saying Model X, but there's different reasons for people to buy. And the Model 3 is a really great introduction into the Tesla family for anyone who's looking to get in. So let's see here. Just want to make sure
there's a question there, Paul, from Renee on
yes.
Street parking in Toronto, and the value proposition for, you know, whether Tesla is a good, you know, what's the proposition for them, right? And I would say this is more than just Toronto. This is something that is going to be probably one of the biggest topics for EV adoption in all cities, right?
Yes.
Which is
condos.
What do you do for condos, apartment buildings, and those people who have street parking? And really, what it comes down to is the cities themselves allowing for you know, outdoor chargers being put in front of people's houses, or individually metered charging ports in condos. And so it's not a really great answer. I think it's, in the short term, it's tough for people who have street parking because they're going to have to rely heavily on supercharging. You know, and if you don't have free supercharging like some of us do, then that becomes a more costly proposition. I still think it's cheaper than gas. I still think, you know, the driving experience is vastly better than a gas car, but the value proposition comes down a fair bit. I think if you have to rely exclusively on supercharging, or some slow chargers that are maybe close to your place of residence. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just kind of shifting gears a little bit, just to kind of spur the discussion, is a lot of times I find people have questions about, well, you know, other than things like price and these type of things, what other considerations are there when you're thinking about EV versus an internal combustion engine traditional vehicle? So I'll kick this one off with a couple of thoughts. One of them obviously is around sustainability. I know that you've probably seen some debate about whether or not, from an environmental perspective, the batteries are better than, you know, the burning of fossil fuel over the life of the vehicle. I find that most of the studies that suggest that a fossil vehicle is more environmentally friendly to be complete and absolute rubbish. Right? If you look at the facts objectively, it kind of works a little bit this way. So the manufacturing of the batteries, yes, there's a environmental impact there, right? But when you look at the ownership of a vehicle over the typical amount of time that someone owns a car, let's say 5-6 years, right? Over the lifetime of that vehicle, your Tesla is going to, you know, much more environmentally friendly in terms of a buying decision than an ICE vehicle by order of magnitude, probably after the first 3 months of driving. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you live, here in Ontario, Canada, we've pretty much gone to zero emission electric generation, right? We have a lot of nuclear, we have hydro. So the generation of the electricity is one of the arguments you hear all the time. Some U.S. states, although they're getting rarer and rarer, get a large percentage of their electricity generation through coal. And the argument is, well, you're just burning coal to power your electric vehicles, right? That's going away very, very quickly. Renewables are the new gold standard in the U.S. If you take a look at the adoption over the last couple of years. So depending on where you live, it'll be a little bit different. But I agree with you. For the most part, you're looking at an order of magnitude cheaper and better for the environment. I've also heard arguments of rare earth minerals for creating battery packs or the motors, and that's just simply not true. I would say the most controversial element is cobalt. All right, everyone knows that cobalt comes from the Congo and is mined with children and is politically and just ethically wrong. Tesla has made a point to lower their amount of cobalt in their battery packs to less than 2%, and they have no cobalt at all in their lithium iron phosphate, and so they're actually on target to have zero cobalt in their battery packs within the next couple of years. So I would say those arguments don't hold a lot of weight, and like you said, it's probably an order of magnitude within the first couple of months of ownership better for the environment. So
yeah, and I have an article here I just wanted to refer to. This is kind of the other thing that I was thinking. Let me put that up on the screen here. So EV sales, this article suggested that by 2030, EV sales will be the majority. So 51% of sales of all automobiles are going to be electric vehicles. And to me, I mean, we're getting close to that point where, buying an ICE vehicle, you really need to think about resale value, because once that tipping point happens, I'm not sure how much value a used ICE fossil fuel car is going to have. Do you have any thoughts about that, Kevin?
You only need to look at BMWs, Mercedes, Audis. If you look at the resale values on those cars over the last 3 to 5 years, they have taken an absolute pummeling because, when the Tesla, the primary vehicles being traded in for Teslas were those vehicles for a long time. And so there's so many of those vehicles flooding the market right now that the price has dropped so substantially. As you see more mainstream vehicles start being traded in for Teslas, and we're already starting to see it, you're actually going to see the value proposition between gas and electric, fade away, just because the resale value will be, not even half of what it's at today, probably in the next 24 months. So it's and depending on where you live too, right? There are lots of incentives in different places that are incenting EV usage a lot greater than others, but in general terms, you're looking at substantial reduction in trade-in values for ICE vehicles for sure.
Yeah, I think that's going to be in the future sooner rather than later, right? Yeah. Are there any other considerations that are just strictly about EV versus ICE that you think that we should draw attention to?
Well, I mean, the biggest ones is basically the change in the sea change in thinking, right? Which is when you buy a gas car, the minute you drive it off the lot, it's 30% reduction, and the car just gets worse over time, right? You want your maps updated, you got to go to a dealership for the most part, right? To get them to update your maps. Teslas, for those who own them, that your car gets better over time. And right now, my car, which is a 2017 Model X has the exact same features and software running it that you would drive one off the lot. In fact,
Yep.
unless that one on the lot didn't get the recent update, mine has more, right? And so having this idea of a car get better over time because software can affect range, it can affect the way the AC system works. You actually get better performance, better energy usage, better energy management. Your car's 3 years old and has 100,000 miles on it, and it can have an improvement in the way that it operates. It's a complete paradigm shift from a traditional ICE vehicle, right? Having this ability to have your car get better over time. So.
Yeah. And then the other thing, if we flip it around a little bit, right, because we know that one of the concerns that people have is about range and range anxiety, right? So this might be a different way of thinking about this question of EV versus ICE. For people who might be leaning towards ICE because they are concerned about range and having that anxiety, what advice would you give them?
As a guy who's put over 100,000 kilometers in the last couple of years and gone all over, most of our two countries, Canada and the United States, I would say that, there's a level of precision in a Tesla where it tells you where you need to go, where you need to stop. You actually don't need to really think about it. So this concept of range anxiety is something, for the most part, that people who don't have a Tesla have, right? Like once you get a Tesla, it tells you what you need to know. So there's really not that much anxiety unless you're going to places, and the Supercharger network is a game changer, right?
Yes.
We'll get into this conversation when we talk about other non-Tesla EVs, but the Supercharger network is, when you're on trips, it's a game changer, right? So it allows you to have a level of relaxation where range is not an issue. Range anxiety just doesn't factor into the conversation 99.9% of the time, just because the car has a level of precision that you just don't need to worry about. So the one last thing, I think, Steve, I think there was a question in here about ICE versus EV safety, right?
Oh yeah, that's a really great one.
Safety. Crash test ratings for Europe, Australia, Britain, Canada, the United States. The best cars ever tested, 1, 2, and 3, are the Tesla Model 3, the Tesla Model S, and the Tesla Model X. Full stop, right? You just can't argue it. It's been tested in multiple jurisdictions. Their active safety features are basically, there's nothing like them on the market. Their structural features have been tested. It's just, Model X's don't roll over. I mean, go on to YouTube and watch the rollover test for the Model X. It's ridiculous. It looks like it's fake, right? So that's the other big thing, that if you give a crap about your family, and you want them to be in the safest vehicle, well, you know what? You don't have to look very far.
That's a fact, right? That's a factual statement.
Yeah.
It's not, I think. It's like, this is fact, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about range anxiety a little bit more, right? Because back in 2017, when we first got our Teslas, Kevin, I think there was one Supercharger located in Lawrence Avenue, remember? And the range, like our original Model X's only had 383 out the door in terms of kilometers of range. But if you fast forward to today, right? The battery capacities and range have improved dramatically, and the number of supercharging locations has grown exponentially. So I can tell you that in the last year, I haven't even thought about range anxiety. It's just not a thing. And we drove just before COVID. I mean, we drove down to Disney World in Florida from Toronto, right? And it was not a single concern about range, right? And I think that's a big difference versus talking about that question in 2017 and talking about that question in 2021, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And just for my American friends who are using the Imperial system, I'll just convert this over magically to miles. And this is the standard range Tesla Model 3. So even with the standard range, right? I mean, it still has a ridiculous amount of range, compared to other vehicles in its class, right? Like, it's just, Tesla's just And look at let's talk about the performance too, right? We're getting into like why Tesla now a little bit, but look at that performance for the price. I mean, 5.3 seconds to 60. I mean, that's a little, insane for that price point.
That was those speed times were Ferrari Testarossas back in the 80s and 90s, right? So
Yeah.
no, it's things have changed a lot.
Yeah, it really has. Okay.
So I'm looking at the boards here, Tesla Canuck, and there's a few things. I see some comments about cold weather, and so I know we're going off script a little bit here, but I felt really strongly. Someone said they don't want to buy a Tesla until they change the handles to account for cold weather. I have to tell you, I've been through many winters now, and I've had a problem with my door handles once, and that was after basically that ice storm we had, the ice storm of the century, and even then it wasn't that big of a deal. It literally, I just took my windshield scraper, I scraped the ice off my door handles, and they opened fine. There was no issues. So it's what I find in the media is that, and I think there's comments in here about quality issues as well. And I think what I find in the media is that we hear a lot of things in the media because it's Tesla. Tesla gets a lot of things get blown out of shape because it's Tesla. The example I would use is car fires, right? You remember back in the day, there's 300,000 gasoline car fires a year, and you never hear about a single one of them, but one Tesla catches on fire and boom, all of a sudden Tesla has a lady came up to me in the parking lot once and said, those things catch on fire, right? And so I find that we have to take a little bit of those things with a grain of salt. In certain very specific circumstances, you could have problem with ice on the door handles, but for the most part, I would say, and living in Canada, we can talk about cold weather, right? So
we're experienced with that.
Yeah, I don't know how many times you've had issues with your door handles, Paul, but
I've had, every car I've ever owned, has had like some kind of a winter issue like that. Remember back when there was mechanical keys, right? And your key lock would get ice, and you couldn't stick your key in, right? So it's not a new problem. And I actually posted a short video to Twitter after the ice storm, right? Because I had the same thing. The car was covered in ice and the door handles were frozen. And I just banged it. Like these things aren't Barbie dolls, right? You don't have to really treat them with that much kid glove, right? You just bang that handle and, it wasn't an issue. But I don't think that's a unique problem to Tesla is where I'm going with that one.
The other thing I'd mention too, Paul, is the Tesla man asked how Teslas are in the snow. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, there's a discussion also going on about quality. So I want to get to that, but hold that thought, right? And you know what? I have an article here from Electric. So in the spirit of being what's the word I'm looking for? Transparent and trying to treat things as equally as possible and in fairness, right? There have been some really bizarre issues with some of the cars coming out of the Fremont factory, like this here, right? The rear seat not being attached. I think a lot of this early on in the production run, you saw some of this. To what extent did the media blow this out of proportion? Is another great question that you already talked about, Kevin, because let's be honest, Tesla sells ads, click-throughs, right? So something like this may have happened to Toyota, but it's just not going to get the type of attention that Tesla's getting. Now, that's not to say that it isn't happening, right? There are bona fide, instances of some real shitty cars coming off that production line, right? But I always think back to something that my parents said to me, and probably everyone's parents here, said, hey, never buy the first production run of a car, right? To me, that just says that it's not a unique problem to Tesla. There's going to be some cars like this, regardless of what car you buy, right? So put it in context and ask yourself a question, whether or not something like this is fixable, right? Yeah, this is not good, but it's certainly fixable, right? And Tesla will 100% fix this. They will fix mismatches in your paint. They will fix any damage to your paint during shipping, or they'll fix all this stuff. So to me, I mean, it's more sensational than real. And I'll toss it to you to comment on that.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if you remember this, but growing up, I remember my father and relatives saying to me, hey, don't ever buy the first or second year of a new model, right? And they weren't talking about electric cars. They were talking about GM, Ford, Toyota, all the OEMs, right? Because the wisdom was that in the first year of production, there are going to be some issues, right? And so I'm not sure why anyone would begrudge Tesla for going through the same thing that car makers who've been making cars for 100 years have the same sort of issues. I do agree with you that there is a bit of a sensationalism, and if someone loses a glass roof on the highway, that's news that's going to get a ton of click-throughs, right? So they'll get a lot more attention from reporting on these issues. But I do think and we've seen this. We saw this with the Model 3, and we saw it with the Model Y, which is Tesla figures it out pretty quickly, and then they apply the fixes, and the quality of the cars, within 8.
Oh, looks like we lost Kevin there. I'm sure he'll join back with an internet glitch. So I've seen there have been some questions about my thoughts on the quality of my model. Oh, let me let Kevin back in.
Well,
yeah, you dropped there, but
but
did you want to finish your thought?
No, you see them fix their production issues pretty darn quick, and I think passing it back to you, your Model Y is proof of that, right?
Yeah, and that's I put up. I hope it's pronounced Roel. If I mispronounce that, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I think this is a really relevant question because I have a Model Y that's 75,000 XXX in terms of the VIN number, and I really think at this point in time they have resolved these issues. Not to say that there won't be one-offs, right? It will happen. There'll be some issues, but for the most part, I'm pretty confident that they've resolved the early production problems. And my particular Model Y, we have not had to return it to the Tesla Service Center for anything. Right? Everything fits together perfectly. There's no weird dents. There's no weird interior issues. Everything is as you would expect it to be. I mean, I pretty much say it's perfect. Hope that answers your question, Roel. Okay. Wow. So we really got on a tear there on a topic. Let's see. Let's get into why Tesla versus another brand, because I think this is an important topic to cover. And I'll start us off. There's a few things that I think that are very unique to Tesla over another brand, and the biggest one that comes to mind is around the charging network, right? So Tesla was an early, very early on invested in building out their supercharging network. And today, at least in North America, from what I've heard of parts of Europe, like the coverage is just, so solid that, again, range anxiety is not something that you ever think about. If we've got some viewers from Europe that just might want to chime in, I'd also be interested. I don't know, Australia, they might be sleeping right now. But elsewhere in the world, if you've got some experience around what the Tesla Supercharger build out is like in your particular country. But here in the United States, I think they've got the bases covered, and it's a huge, huge advantage. Like, you can't diminish this in any way. Like GM, Ford, all the rest, they have a huge mountain to climb with where do you charge your car, right?
Yeah, I would just add to that. you know, Tesla can't do it all themselves. They cannot be the only EVs that transition the world off of gasoline vehicles. I mean, so if you're a fan of the planet, you have to root for others to get their act together. And one of the things I lament is the fact that, you know, I look at the Ford Mach-E, which looks like a great car. It really does. And my brother works for Ford, and he loves the car. He's driven it. He thinks it's a game changer. But I wonder if it were me and I had to buy a Ford, what would I be thinking about? And I would be thinking about the charging network, right? And here in Canada, I know in the United States they have Electrify America, and which is a little bit better than what we have here, which is basically nothing, but it's nothing compared to the Supercharger network, right? Like just things like being able to integrate it with your maps and being able to see how many chargers are being used and how many are free, right? And making a choice of whether you stop or go to the next one. You know, those kind of things are need to haves, right? And as far as I can tell, nobody has that except for Tesla. And I haven't heard, honestly, I haven't heard any OEMs say how they're going to deal with this, right? They certainly are not going to try and build their own network. That's been made very clear, and they're going to rely on third parties. And so I worry about that, because that's really, really going to put a lot of pressure on Tesla to do a lot more because the OEMs can't do it.
I think it's great that there are options like Electrify America, but I remember just not too long ago there was that story about how they shut down the entire East Coast, all their superchargers, to do some type of maintenance, and people couldn't charge. So, you know, who do you hold accountable there? Do you hold accountable Ford or GM, or do you hold accountable Electrify America? Like, you know, it just gets a little bit bizarre, and I think Tesla being so vertically integrated like this is a huge advantage. I pinned a question here because you know, I think this is a really good question about buying a used Tesla. So let's just talk about this for a moment. I'm going to talk a little bit from experience in terms of trading in a Model 3. So we traded in our Model 3 for a Model Y, and I would agree that I don't think I got any value for the full self-driving, right? And I'm wondering if that might be a economical way, if you will, to get into a car with full self-driving. And in terms of the number of kilometers, you and I, this is also something we were talking about before the podcast, right? Which is the electric motors are built to last so much longer that is there really such a thing as a maximum kilometers like you would typically think of in an ICE vehicle? So why don't I throw that question to you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big differences between a gas car and an electric car is look, kilometers on an electric motor don't matter. I mean, straight up, the engineering term MTBF, mean time between failure, for a gas motor is 250,000 miles. For an electric motor, it's 1.5 million miles, right? So you're never driving that. So so the amount of kilometers doesn't really matter. What probably does matter on an electric car is what kind, how that person treated the battery, right? And so there are certain things that, you know, if you're an EV owner, you know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. You know, one of the more common ones, the simple ones, is not charging your battery to 100% and letting it sit for a long period of time, right? That's not good for a battery. It's not good for your phone. It's not good for any electronics that are powered by batteries. And so I would say degradation on the battery is probably a better indication of what you want to look at in a used vehicle, right? Because that'll tell you how the battery was treated. And you know, Tesla's battery warranty is really, really good, and they have the best battery management system in the industry, you know, bar none. Like, just, it's not even a discussion right now. So so I would look at when I was looking at used cars in a Tesla, I would look at the condition of kind of the interior, how the person treated the interior of the car, and pretty much the state of the battery. I wouldn't worry so much about the miles.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Again, you know, in the spirit of a balanced view, I wanted to put this comment up as well because I think it's a good one, right? And you know, I think it gets back to what we were talking about earlier, where Tesla is just a very different animal, right? They don't have a model year where, this is the car for the next year, and then next year there's going to be the next model year, and it's going to include these things. And Tesla can change anything at any time, and that does lead to a little bit of unfairness in terms of, you just bought a car and now it's obsolete a few weeks later. Do you want to tackle that one, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know T. Scott Third. He says he feels cheated. The different hardware features. I mean, if you're not talking about aesthetics, really all we're talking about is a wireless charger, USB-C, and a glove box USB stick, right? So, yeah, cool. I would love to have, if I were buying a Model Y, I'd want the new stuff too. I wouldn't get. I mean, I know Paul, your Model Y didn't come with the new stuff, right? So
I missed the new console by like a few hundred cars, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the VIN number.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to get the heated steering wheel. I might have missed that too. And yeah, it's a bit of a bummer, right? But if I look at the rest of the vehicle and the rest of the experience, it's just so minor.
Yeah.
And that's the advice I would give T. Scott Third is that if you look at it in the context of the entire vehicle, it may change your perspective on it, because that's the way I think about it. I love the Model Y, and not having the new console. Well, the old console's still pretty good too.
Well, in fact, I would actually say that I'm not sure if the new console has a quick charge 3 module to allow phones who can accommodate the wireless fast charging, but I would say if it doesn't, then having the ability to put your own in, so you have wireless fast charging, is actually a better thing than what they've upgraded to. So
exactly,
look,
right?
Yeah, I mean, look, depending on what you want, I have a wireless quick charger in my Model 3 because I bought it aftermarket and installed it. It cost me $45, right? So if it were, look, I totally get you. If it were a brand new motor that doubled my performance, or if it were a battery that gave me 150 more kilometers, or MC1 to MCU2, those would be big deals that I would lose sleep over. But these minor things that from sort of the last Model 3 version and to the new one, they're nice, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it.
Yeah, and I think this is a follow-up question around the used Tesla, and how to figure out if the battery has been abused. Without having the car and actually having an extended kind of test drive experience, I'm not sure. I mean, Tesla doesn't provide a way for us through the system menus to get the health of the battery like Apple does with the iPhone, for example, right? Where you can go and you can see the current state of your battery. So I think it's a really great question. And maybe it's more about kind of knowing the history of the vehicle, getting the service history of the vehicle, and try to piece together whether or not, if you're buying used, this person is someone who would take care of their car, right? I think most people will probably take good care of their Teslas. To spend that kind of money and then to abuse the battery is counterintuitive to me. So it might be an issue, but I think it'll be an edge case. I think in most of the time you're going to have somebody who's had due care of their battery.
Yeah, there are some apps out there that you can use with varying degrees of accuracy, so you got to be careful. I mean, and you can Google. There's a ton of stuff that people will talk about out there, and the more accurate ones I would say is ones that you plug into the comms module and like Scan My Tesla Bjorn is a guy that has used that in many of his analysis, right? Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure they would let you probably plug it into the car if you were serious about buying it, right? So if you really wanted to see what the max capacity of the battery is, that'd probably be a really quick and easy way to do it, right? But a simple Google search will tell you what you can do to what apps are the best to use for that. But to Tesla Canuck's point, unless you're purposely going out of your way to like kill the battery, it's really hard to do. Like the battery management system that Tesla's got it's pretty hard to abuse the battery by accident, so to speak.
Yeah. That's a great point. The BMS, the battery management system that Tesla has, by any measurement in terms of anything I've ever read, is probably the best, system that's been designed and deployed on an EV. So, to a large extent, I do think that Tesla, especially with today's modern, like the 2020s, probably going back to, I'd say, maybe 2017 at least. I'm not sure that it's as big of an issue as maybe it was back in the early days, like 2014, 2015 with the Model S, right?
They have millions, tens, maybe hundreds of millions of kilometers and miles of driving data now, which they feed into. And that, going back to what we were saying about how the car constantly gets updated, the BMS is one of those things, right?
Yep.
Like it's a computer algorithm that continues to be updated and improved with every update, right? As more driving miles and data comes through, right? So this is one of the fundamental benefits of a Tesla is that as the company learns about certain things, it can apply those learnings very, very quickly, and not just to the cars coming off the manufacturing line, but to every car in the fleet, which it boggles my mind to this day that OEM car manufacturers still have not got their heads around the fact that you can do over-the-air updates, right? So
yeah, and a perfect example of that is when they've collected all the data and they understand what's going on with their battery and how people are using the vehicles and this type of stuff. Is I think I've lost track now how many times Tesla has launched an over-the-air update that has increased range. Right.
Yeah.
So as they learn more about their batteries and how good their battery management system is, they do things like that. So that to me says that they have a lot of confidence. If they're increasing range on an OTA, not just once, but several times, they've got some great confidence in the longevity of their batteries. So,
yeah.
All right. So I know we're just about at the hour and 6 minute mark. So I want to make sure we get to, I think there's one more topic that we haven't covered or haven't covered adequately. So I want to turn back to why Tesla versus another brand. And before we do that, though, just very selfishly, I just want to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel. If you're enjoying this, content, it'd be super helpful to me. So that's the only pitch I'm going to make. Thank you very much. So let's get back into why Tesla versus another brand. So I mentioned the Supercharger network as a key differentiator. Are there any other things, Kevin, that you think are of that magnitude or close there too that would really differentiate Tesla?
Yeah, and I saw a few comments along in the boards on maintenance and repairs, especially if you live in one of those states that doesn't allow for the direct sales model. So first and foremost, the direct sales model. I don't know anybody who says, "Man, I love going to a dealership." Right, for maintenance, for anything. I mean, I've never come across anyone who enjoy it. I certainly have never enjoyed going to a dealership, and I'm thankful I never need to go to one ever again. The Rangers, the mobile Rangers, having the ability to have your car maintained or serviced at your place of work, at your home, at your in-laws' house, wherever you may be, when your appointment is a game changer. Honestly, I've had a couple of service appointments done in my driveway. I felt bad for the guy. It was middle of January. He had to replace one of my headlights. It was like minus 22 Celsius outside. It was just insanely cold. I felt so bad for the guy, but you know what? Did it with a smile on his face, showed up when he said he was going to show up. Like it is absolutely fundamentally different model than what the OEMs are doing. And I have to say it's one of those surprising things that I didn't know about when I bought the car that I'm super spoiled and happy to have now. The other thing is and we talked about the quality issues of cars coming off the line. There's also constant improvements going on, and it allows them to make changes and improvements on an ongoing basis. And that's something that no other car company, it's just not they don't think like that. Like Monroe and Associates, he was in the car industry for 40 years and basically said, in order for an OEM to make a single change to a car current on the current production line, it's 18 months from the idea to actually getting it into the car. Tesla had a goal early on. I saw an article early on saying they need to find, they had a target of 3 to 5 improvements per month on the production line, right? So, which means that over a year, you could see hundreds of improvements from the start of one year to the next, right? And that is only a good thing when it comes to for consumers, right? Is having a product that just gets better as it gets built, and have the machine build the machine and learn from that, right? So it's a massive difference that no other car company, EV or otherwise, deploys in the way that they go about things. So,
and we've talked about over-the-air updates in a different context, but it also applies here in terms of the why Tesla over another brand, right? And it's like I do recall reading about, for example, the Volkswagen ID3. And again, I'm not slamming other manufacturers, right? But I know that there's been some issues that they haven't been able to OTA. And at one point, they were running around with USB sticks to thousands of their vehicles that were sitting
10,000
on a lot ready to 10,000, yeah,
10,000.
Being ready, I guess, to be shipped or something like that. So not being able to do OTA, I would stay away from any manufacturer that's not doing OTA, because you're back to that thing that I hated about traditional cars, is that when you buy it, that's it, right? 5 years later, that's when you're going to get some improvements, right? When you go to buy another car. And this is just so fundamentally different what Tesla has done with OTA that I wouldn't consider any other manufacturer that isn't doing OTA, period, full stop. Right.
Yeah.
So we have a question here about daily charge level. So for me, I typically charge to 80%. So I try to keep it between 30 and 80. And during COVID, I'm not actually doing very much driving. Matter of fact, in a month, we only put 500 kilometers on our Model Y, if you can believe that. So yeah, I'm basically charging it to 80 and then, plugging it back in and charging it back to 80 when it gets down to about 30, 40%. But that being said, I think Elon is pretty much all but confirmed that you can charge, up to 90 every day, right? It's not going to impact the longevity of your battery. So I wouldn't hesitate to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say he's actually gone on record based on going back to what I was saying before about having enough miles under observation that they can make some pretty strong predictions. He's actually said 95% is okay, but the car doesn't run as efficiently at 95% because it dials back the regen, and so when they dial back the regenerative braking, it doesn't put as much battery back, regenerative energy back into the battery, and so the car runs not as efficient as it normally does. So he suggested 90% is more than okay, and I charge to 80% as well. But I would say for the first 2 years I own the cars, I charged to 90. I only gone to 80 during COVID. So,
yeah. All right. So we've actually covered all of the items on our agenda, but I wanted to leave some time here to specifically try to address some questions if anyone has them and wants to post them. We'll try to get to as many as we can. It's been a little bit hard following the feed. It's been going by fairly quickly at times.
Do you want to revisit the winter driving question?
Oh yeah, yes, let's do that. I just did like several winter driving videos with my new Tesla Model Y. So why don't we start with that, right? So let's start with the driving the Model Y in when there's a lot of snow on the ground, for example, or they're in a snowstorm. And I still have the all-season tires that came on the Model Y. I'm just waiting for the supply to catch up to demand. I just feel like the tires are overpriced right now. And we have another car with winter tires. So if we really get stuck, we can take that car. So I'm not super concerned about it just yet. But that being said, that, the all seasons, I would certainly recommend that you do get winter tires if you don't have another option, because, the all-wheel drive gets you moving, right?
Yeah.
But is it going to allow you to stop? No. Right? You're going to rely on your tires for that, and the rubber on all seasons is going to be harder than the rubber on a winter, and you're going to have less grip. So I really tried to do a scenario where I was pushing those all season tires, and the car was all over the place, right? You can see that in the video. If you want to look at my video history, I think it was like 4 or 5 videos ago. Now, in terms of the range loss, right? This is a really great story in terms of Tesla now having the heat pump on the new 2021 Model 3s, as well as all of the Model Ys that have been produced. And in my tests, the heat pump has had a dramatic improvement to efficiency in cold weather driving. At -11, I conducted a test, and I think the range loss was somewhere in the neighborhood, if I'm going by memory here, I think it was 24% or so. Whereas on a similar day with my Model 3, I was looking at probably a 45% range loss. If you precondition your battery before leaving your house, I redid the exact same test at the same temperature, but I preconditioned first, and the range loss was only was it 18-19%. So that's really not much at all, right? If you've got 550 kilometers of range, right, and you lose 20%, right, you still got a lot left in reserve. It's not like the early days of EVs, right? So I'd say winter driving, cold weather driving, Tesla has really made dramatic improvements since 2017.
Yeah, I would echo that. And preconditioning for those who don't have a Tesla, preconditioning with the scheduling, the car being able to schedule departure or schedule, charging, because charging warms your battery. So having the ability to schedule your charges and schedule your car, there's there's absolutely no reason unless it's a unplanned trip for you never to go out in the winter without a preconditioned car. It's one of the things I love, is always going into a warm car, right? And I saw one of the posts, someone asked if having a heated steering wheel was necessary. I think my answer is absolutely not. I precondition, I preheat my car everywhere I go, and so I don't even scrape my car anymore. I'll leave the thing preconditioned for 45 minutes to an hour, and it'll only take 5%, 6% off my battery, and it'll melt everything off my car. So I don't brush my car off. I don't scrape it. It just melts itself, right? And so and if you have the time, it's an amazing feature. I have to say I love it. The other thing is driving, right? So having an EV with a battery pack that's really far down low gives a low center of gravity. The cars are heavier, and as long as you do have snow tires, they handle like nothing I've ever driven, honestly. Even my Model 3 is a long-range rear-wheel drive, so it's rear-wheel, and I was really, really nervous about buying a rear-wheel drive car for a Canadian winter. I have to say I am super, super impressed. It handles very, very well, and we've never gotten stuck. And it just, if anything, I'm upset about the fact that the car controls the spin of the tires so completely. I can't even go into a parking lot and have fun and try to do burnouts and spin outs unless I put on the anti-slip, take it off. It's really, really hard to take the car out of control, which kind of is a little bit of a downer when you want to have some fun in a parking lot. But yeah, I would say yeah, they are some of the finest cars to drive in the winter, full stop, that I've ever driven. So.
All right, I've got a couple of questions I want to get to. The first one here is what I have on the screen. I just recently went through a touchless delivery experience. With COVID out there, this might be really relevant to a lot of people who are thinking about making a purchase. And it was really cool what they did. All of the documents were in the car, And so my wife and I went out into the car by ourselves, the Model Y that we picked up. We did our signatures in the car, and somebody came by to collect them. And it was certainly a touchless experience. It wasn't as good as the normal experience, though. I will say that, because normally getting it is an event, and they take your picture and all this kind of stuff. So you lose those type of things. But if you're worried about COVID and you want a touchless experience, they do offer it, and it was very effective. Okay. Let's see here. Someone had a question about scheduling. And Kevin, I know that you schedule religiously. My commute schedule has never been one that made that feature useful for me, because it was always all over the place. But you use it a lot. So do you want to comment on it?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, when I was commuting from the suburbs to downtown Toronto, I would commute. It's about 50 kilometers each way, so 100 kilometers a day, and I would leave at the same time every day. And I would plug my car in at night, and it would take advantage of the lower cost of electricity at night, and it would pre-warm my car. So every morning when I get into my car at 6:45. My car is warm, it's charged, and I don't even need to think about it, right? It doesn't matter if it's minus 20 outside, it doesn't matter. It just, because my car is warm, it's charged, and it's clean, right? And so I just unplug it and go. You can schedule for only weekdays. You can schedule for all 7 days if you want it to. There's just the most recent update allows you to change the time of use electricity rates in your settings, because not every jurisdiction has the same rules around time of use and cost for electricity. So you can actually set it to now only charge in off-peak times, right? And so for some jurisdictions, that's a substantial savings, because here in Toronto, off peak is 10.5 cents, and on peak is 21.5 or something like that. So it's double, right? And so that's a big deal, right? I mean, it's not like gasoline big deal, but it's a big deal. So scheduling is huge, and it's one of my favorite features, honestly.
Okay, fantastic. Next question we have is about snowbanks, and I guess large amounts of snow on the ground. And what I can tell you is, like, whether it's been the X, the 3, or the Y, I have never been stuck, getting out of my community in large snow drifts or snowplow berms, as he calls it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't worry about it. I just kind of just plow right over them. What about you, Kevin? I mean, you don't have to be concerned about, like, the battery has a titanium shield over it, right? Like you're not really worried about damaging your battery or any weird stuff like that, right?
I think Ed's probably worried about the electronics in the bumper, like the sensors and stuff in the bumpers.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. I just, I have a great deal of fun, honestly, with the snowbanks. My ex has air suspension, so I put it into what I affectionately call monster truck mode, and just obliterate the snowbanks. I have a lot of fun doing that too. So I don't do it as much with my Model 3, but there's been occasion where I just basically have just plowed right through the snowbanks, and just, the cars are so heavy, unless it's rained and then refrozen, where it's like a mountain of ice, then, obviously I'd be concerned about that. But I'd still run over it with my Model X for sure. I would.
Yeah.
But.
And I was just going to say, and I put this comment up on the screen, because if there is some type of ice, you might be concerned about something like this, right? Really hard packed ice or something. So definitely something to consider. But if it's just a regular kind of snowdrift, snowbank, just drive over it.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay. It's we're an hour and 22 minutes into it. I think we'll kind of wrap this up. Any last words, Kevin? Advice for people who are maybe new to Tesla and considering buying a Tesla?
Yeah, my parting words, actually, I saw it early in the conversation, is for people who don't know, or say, I saw a post that said, my father-in-law loves gas cars and won't even consider an EV. What should I do?
I saw that one.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what should I do? nothing makes a believer out of people like a test drive, right? I have offered, basically, I will offer anyone who asks test drive my car, right? And so I have a 100% conversion rate. So I've had 15 people test drive my car. Some people I knew, some people I did not know, and every single one of them have ended up either sooner or later buying a Tesla. So there's nothing like, you know, the actual experience of driving the vehicle, right? I
The
mean, it's
instant
one thing.
torque.
Yeah, it's one thing to own and have all of these great, wonderful features like over-the-air updates and all these other things, but if you really want to get someone's attention, let them test drive the car, right? Or go for a test drive yourself. It will be hard to ignore the car after you've driven it. It's just so different, so much fun. The first day I owned my Model X, I took my 89-year-old grandmother in it, and she literally didn't stop talking about it for 2 months, right? And this is a woman who had never heard of an electric car. She'd never even, the concept didn't even exist to her before that day. So my parting words were, if you're considering it or you know someone who is, drive one. Simple, right? It doesn't even need to be the model that you're going to own. Just drive one, right? And then go from there.
I think that's a great way to put it, because a lot of people who are car buffs and car enthusiasts, I mean, there's a number of different reasons, right? But one of them that usually is a factor is around performance, right? And performance per dollar on a Tesla is extremely high. Like I had what did I have up there earlier? I had the Model 3. Let me just put this back up quickly. So I had the Model 3. I mean, this is just the base model standard plus, and it's going to do 0 to 60 in 5.3. And I can tell you, having owned a rear wheel drive Model 3 myself as well, that the steering, the handling, the cornering, all of these things will not disappoint you. So your performance per dollar is just extremely high with the Tesla, in my opinion. All right, so I think that's actually, this one caught my eye. I got to put this one up before we go. Do you encounter more road rage, hateful drivers if you drive a Tesla? This was a thing maybe about, I don't know what, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. It made a lot of the news. I don't know how sensational it was versus actual. In my experience, I've only once in my 3 years have I had it was a pickup truck who, was clearly not liking my Tesla. But I think that's extremely rare. And I think, you're more likely to get involved in road rage, from somebody else that has nothing to do with your Tesla. So that's kind of my opinion on it. Kevin?
Yeah. Connor made a good point. There's two groups of people I think that have a lot more rage around Teslas. One is definitely the pickup truck crew who try to coal roll people. If you don't know what that is, go take a look at it. It's disgusting, and it'll make you cry for the earth. But the second group is usually, and I hate to pick out brands, but I'm gonna anyways. Audi and BMW drivers, right?
Yes.
Guys, and I'm gonna say it's guys. It might not be, but I'm gonna say it's guys who spent their hard-earned money thinking they bought fast cars, only to learn that, their cars aren't very fast, and they're not very happy about it. So. And Connor pointed out he needs to show them that their cars are not that fast. I've been known to partake in a few of those as well. So.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, it's not nice. It's not nice having an M5 and getting dusted by a 6,000-pound 7-seat SUV. It's probably pretty painful.
Well, there's a cure for that as well, though. It's called the Cybertruck. So if you want to drive the biggest, baddest thing out there, it'd be hard for anyone to compete with that. So
I can't wait.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. It was a pleasure to host this for you. You can reach out to me at theteslacanuck@gmail.com. If I didn't get to your question, you have a question for me, I'll try to answer it the best that I can. I want to wish everybody all the best of this holiday season, and we will see you again soon. I'm going to probably do a monthly live Q&A similar to this. So thanks for joining. Tesla Canuck and TeslaKevv, over and out.